1. Does Sirius Black survive? They had theories, bold ones, emotional ones, some so wildly confident you'd think they had inside info from J.K. Rowling herself. Fans were sure Sirius Black would return, that Harry and Hermione were endgame, that Neville would avenge his parents, and that Dumbledore was secretly living his best animagus life as a phoenix. And don't even get me started on the Harry's been dreaming the whole time crowd. But when the Deathly Hallows hit shelves, it crushed expectations like a bludger to the face. Today, we're diving into the theories fans clung to like a firebolt in a hurricane, only to find out they were completely wrong. People just couldn't accept it. Sirius Black, Harry's cool, rebellious godfather, gone like that? No body, no proper goodbye, just a dramatic swirl into a mysterious veil. Naturally, the fan theories exploded faster than a Bertie Bott's bean in a fireplace. Some said he was trapped between worlds. Others swore he'd return as a ghostly warrior in the final battle. But let's be honest, when someone dies in a way that's more symbolic than physical, folks are going to start reaching for anything that smells like hope. If you're wondering why it hurt so bad, it's because Sirius wasn't just a character. He represented freedom. He was the anti-Dursley, the man who broke out of Azkaban just to protect Harry. Losing him felt like losing a future that never got the chance to exist. The lack of closure? Brutal. And the fact that nobody really explained the veil for another whole book? Yeah, that didn't help either. It was like Rowling handed us a mystery and then walked away with a wink. Then came the Deathly Hallows, dropping truth bombs like confetti at a wizard wedding. When Sirius appeared via the Resurrection Stone, it was game over for the survival theories. He didn't show up in the flesh or even with a clever spell loophole. Just a soft, spiritual moment in the forest, like a magical version of FaceTime with the dead. And no, you can't rewind it. You'll stay with me? Harry asks. Until the very end, Sirius answers. The Deathly Hallows. No resurrection, just resolution. Still, fans clung to threads. Maybe the veil was a portal? Maybe he was trapped in another realm? Maybe Dumbledore secretly knew how to bring him back but chose not to because, I don't know, moral lessons? But Rowling never blinked. She confirmed over and over. Sirius was gone. What fans mistook for a possible comeback was actually a poetic exit. Beautiful, tragic, and absolutely final. That's what made it stick. And yet, if Sirius couldn't come back, what about others? Surely someone would defy death in a more satisfying way, right? Someone like, let's say, a certain wise professor with a questionable beard and a flair for the dramatic? 2. Harry and Hermione together? You know what really gets the cauldrons bubbling in the fandom? Relationship debates. And the whole Harry-Hermione dynamic sparked more controversy than Snape's teaching methods. There were entire forums dedicated to shipping these two, convinced their bond had the slow burn potential of a classic romance novel. After all, they shared a tent, survived mortal peril, and exchanged more knowing glances than Ron did with a plate of mashed potatoes. So naturally, some fans were certain that Harry and Hermione were endgame. But here's the thing. Just because two people have chemistry doesn't mean they're meant to date. Ever had a best friend who felt more like family? That's what Harry and Hermione were. Siblings in arms. They leaned on each other not because of romantic tension, but because they understood the stakes. And Ron, as awkward as he was, brought out a side of Hermione no one else could. He challenged her, annoyed her, grounded her. Sounds a lot like actual relationships, doesn't it? Even J.K. Rowling chimed in years later, admitting she had some second thoughts about Ron and Hermione's pairing. That sent shockwaves through the fandom like someone shouted Avada Kedavra in a crowded Great Hall. But if you read between the lines, especially in the Half-Blood Prince and Deathly Hallows, it's clear that the romantic arc was always bending toward Ron. Remember the jealousy, the fights, the raw teenage chaos? Yeah, that wasn't just filler. Still, fans clung to hope. Maybe there was an alternate ending where Harry kisses Hermione under the mistletoe. Maybe Ron chokes on a chocolate frog and the path clears. But the final chapter doesn't lie. Harry ends up with Ginny, a glow-up story if there ever was one, and Hermione finds her awkward, red-headed match. Their love stories weren't built on grand gestures. They were forged in fire, war, and a whole lot of emotional tension. Real, messy, magical. And just when hearts were still reeling from this romantic reality, fans started speculating about Harry's future job. Surely someone who took down Voldemort deserved a teaching post at Hogwarts, right? 3. Harry as Defense Against the Dark Arts professor? If there were ever a job tailor-made for Harry Potter, it had to be Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. The kid basically lived in a crash course on how not to die every year. From dodging killing curses to leading Dumbledore's army, he had more real-world experience than any textbook ever printed. Fans were convinced that post-war Harry would settle into a nice little office at Hogwarts, hang up some dark creature posters, and give dramatic lectures in front of a chalkboard like a magical Mr. Keating. But plot twist, Harry said, "Thanks, but no thanks to the academic life." And you know what? It makes sense. Teaching requires patience, lesson plans, and a tolerance for hormonal teenagers. Harry barely survived his own school years. Why would he willingly go back? Instead, he became an Auror. You know, the kind that chases down dark wizards and still gets to use cool spells without writing a single syllabus. He didn't just fight evil. He cleaned it up from the inside. Now, for those of you raising a skeptical eyebrow, let's be real. Harry was never the studious type. Hermione? Sure. She probably had her own color-coded career roadmap by 5th year. But Harry thrived on instinct, guts, and a little luck. Sitting at a desk grading essays on Boggart theory wasn't in his DNA. Plus, the Ministry needed rebuilding. The whole wizarding world had just faced collapse, and Harry knew where he was needed most. Out in the field, not in a classroom. By the time the cursed child rolls around, yes, we're going there, he's head of the Department of Magical Law Enforcement. Big desk, bigger responsibilities, and even less time for teaching teenagers how to duel. Sure, he probably popped into Hogwarts now and then, waved to McGonagall, maybe gave a motivational speech, but his destiny was always bigger than a single role. He wasn't meant to teach the next generation. He was meant to shape the entire system they'd grow up in. And while Harry traded in chalkboards for dark wizards, another character's arc was still cooking in the background. A quiet, underestimated student with a heart full of grief and a sword waiting for justice. 4. Neville, killing Bellatrix. Neville Longbottom, the glow-up king of Hogwarts. Let's not forget this was the same kid who once got stuck in a full-body bind and left on the common room floor like a magical burrito. But by the end of the saga, this dude was slicing Horcruxes with a flaming sword like it was a Tuesday. So it's no surprise fans had high hopes he'd be the one to take down Bellatrix Lestrange. I mean, she tortured his parents into madness. The poetic justice practically wrote itself. But J.K. Rowling, being the narrative plot ninja she is, had other plans. When push came to shove in the Battle of Hogwarts, it wasn't Neville who got the final blow on Bellatrix. It was Molly Weasley. That's right. Sweet, apron-wearing, mother of 7 Molly turned full Terminator and dropped the most iconic line in the series. "Not my daughter, you bitch!" The Deathly Hallows. Instant legend status. Bellatrix never saw it coming. Honestly, none of us did. Now let's be fair, Neville wasn't exactly benched. He got his big hero moment too. When he pulled the sword of Gryffindor out of the sorting hat and beheaded Nagini like a medieval champ, jaws hit the floor. That snake was the final Horcrux, remember? Without Neville's move, Voldemort would have been basically immortal. So yeah, he didn't kill Bellatrix, but he literally destroyed the last piece of the Dark Lord's soul. Not bad for someone who used to lose his toad every other chapter. The decision to let Molly have that kill wasn't just shock value. It was strategy. It showed that power doesn't always come from wands or war experience. Sometimes it comes from love. Raw, primal, mama bear energy that turns a homemaker into a hero. And it gave us balance. The next generation got their shine. Hi, Neville. But the older generation reminded us they weren't done just yet. And while the dust was settling from that explosive duel, people started turning their attention to another mystery. A twist that had some fans whispering in corridors, convinced that a certain bearded mastermind hadn't quite left the chessboard just yet. 5. Is Dumbledore really dead? Now here's a conspiracy that could make even Luna Lovegood raise an eyebrow. Dumbledore? Dead? Really dead? A whole sect of fans refused to believe it. After all, this is the man who said, "Death is but the next great adventure, the Sorcerer's Stone." And when he took that swan dive off the astronomy tower in Half-Blood Prince, people weren't just heartbroken. They were suspicious. No body burst into flames, no ghostly farewell, just gone. And from that silence, the wildest theories began to brew. Some believed he was a Phoenix Animagus. Yep, that he literally became Fox and flew off into the sunset. Others were convinced he was secretly hiding in limbo, pulling strings like a magical puppet master. Then there were the code breakers, fans who dug through every line of dialogue for secret Morse messages from beyond the veil. One Tumblr post even claimed that Albus was an acronym. Spoiler, it's not. But you've got to admire the dedication. These people were doing magical calculus just to keep their favorite headmaster alive. The reality? It came crashing down in the Deathly Hallows during the King's Cross limbo scene. Harry meets Dumbledore. Yes, a spectral, oddly peaceful version of him. And finally gets answers. It wasn't a dream, not a trick, and definitely not animagus escapism. Dumbledore was dead. But true to form, even death didn't stop him from offering one last cryptic pep talk and a twinkle-eyed monologue. He said, "Of course it is happening inside your head, but why on earth should that mean that it is not real?" Leave it to Dumbledore to confuse and comfort in the same sentence. Why did people cling so tightly to this theory? Because Dumbledore was more than a character. He was a symbol of wisdom, safety, and that nagging feeling that someone always had a plan. Losing him felt like losing the last adult in the room. So denial turned into theory, and theory into hope. Because if he could come back, maybe everything could still be okay. But just when fans were beginning to accept Dumbledore's final bow, a different Black family member started stirring up his own storm of speculation, one that involved a letter, a locket, and a whole lot of unfinished business. 6. Did Regulus Black fake his death? Regulus Arcturus Black. The name alone sounds like he came out of a Shakespearean tragedy. Sirius's little brother, Slytherin Golden Boy, and according to half the fandom, a master of faking his own death. Now, this theory? Oh, it had legs. People swore Regulus had staged the whole thing, vanished into the shadows to quietly sabotage Voldemort from the inside. And with how little we actually knew about his final moments, it didn't seem too far-fetched. It was like the magical version of, he's just off the grid lying low. The mystery deepens when you toss in the cave scene in the Half-Blood Prince, that cursed locket, the one with the fake Horcrux and the cryptic note signed R.A.B., that was the smoking wand. Fans went full detective mode, linking timelines, decoding initials, even speculating that Creature was helping smuggle messages back and forth like some enchanted postal worker. And honestly, if you reread that chapter with the theory in mind, it's almost too perfect. Almost. But the Deathly Hallows cleared things up, and it was tragic. Regulus didn't fake anything. He found the locket, drank the Inferi-infested potion, and died trying to take Voldemort down. According to Creature, Regulus gave the ultimate order: get the locket out and get out alive. That wasn't some elaborate escape plan. It was a sacrifice. A 17-year-old boy, raised by Death Eater ideology, choosing to defy the Dark Lord in silence. No dramatic exit, no applause, just quiet rebellion. What made it hit harder? He didn't live long enough to see Voldemort fall. He didn't even know if his plan worked. And yet, that act, hidden away in a cave no one visited, set the entire Horcrux hunt in motion. Regulus Black went from Sirius's forgettable sibling to a cornerstone of the Resistance. Not every hero gets a statue. Some just get a line in a house elf's memory and a thank you whispered decades too late. And just when fans were catching their breath from this heartbreaking revelation, another theory came crashing through the wall like the Kool-Aid Man. This time, dragging us all the way back to Privet Drive, with a twist so outrageous, it almost made sense. 7. Was it all just a dream? Oh yes, the infamous, it was all a dream theory. The Hail Mary of desperate fan explanations and last-minute school essays everywhere. Some fans were convinced, that Harry would wake up in the cupboard under the stairs, blink a few times, and realize everything. Hogwarts, Voldemort, Dobby's tragic sock arc was just one long hallucination brought on by neglect, trauma, and probably expired canned soup. And sure, we've all seen stories take that cheap escape route before. But with Harry Potter? Really? Let's be honest. The theory had traction because it preyed on something very real, how absurdly magical the entire journey felt. Owls delivering mail, moving staircases, Bertie Bott's every flavor beans including vomit. Who wouldn't think, wait, is this real life or a fever dream? But turning the whole saga into a figment of Harry's imagination, that would have been the ultimate narrative betrayal. All that growth, all those sacrifices, gone with a just kidding. To be fair, the books did flirt with the line between dreams and reality. Dumbledore even leaned into it in the Deathly Hallows during the King's Cross scene. "Tell me one last thing," said Harry. "Is this real, or has this been happening inside my head?" And Dumbledore, with his usual cryptic mic drop, replies, "Of course it is happening inside your head, Harry, but why on earth should that mean that it is not real? That's not just philosophy. That's a polite way of saying, stop overthinking it, mate. If it were a dream, explain the detailed family trees, the wizard banking system, and why Umbridge was that specific shade of evil. You don't invent Dolores Umbridge unless you've really been through something. Plus, the final chapter, 19 years later, firmly roots us in a future, not a false awakening. It shows Harry grown, married, sending his own kids off to Hogwarts. You don't end a dream with tuition bills. Still, even with the last word written, some readers kept wondering. Not because they doubted the story, but because they didn't want to let it go. And maybe that's the magic of Harry Potter. When something feels that alive, even the wildest theory doesn't seem that far from the truth. So now I have to ask, which of these theories had you convinced until the very end? Were you emotionally invested in Sirius Black coming back like a ghost with a vengeance? Did you picture Harry and Hermione riding off into the sunset while Ron cried into a box of chocolate frogs? Or maybe you genuinely thought the whole thing would end with Harry waking up under the stairs like it was all one weird fever dream. Whatever your theory was, I want to hear it. Drop it in the comments. Let's see which ones aged like butterbeer and which ones not so much. Before you vanish faster than a portkey to the Ministry of Magic, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. This channel is your magical passport to theories, truths, and the details even Mad-Eye Moody might have missed. And trust me, you don't want to be the one left behind on the Hogwarts Express. And speaking of magic, if you've ever mixed up a charm with a spell, or thought a jinx was just a curse with bad PR, you need to check out the video on your screen right now. Understand the difference between spells, charms, jinxes, and curses in Harry Potter. Go ahead, click it. Your OWLs depend on it.